An Untraveled Road by Neon Zangetsu, Chapter 12, At the Stroke of Midnight, Part 2. We must never give in to fear. We mustn't conform to it. Never let it control our thoughts, for fear is the enemy of trust, and if we allow it, fear will most certainly destroy us. The Future, At the Stroke of Midnight, Part 2. This was his moment. Jack Skill preened before a full-length mirror, fastidiously making the last of his preparations with great care. He tittered softly as he attended to his task, working with the air of a man possessed. Possessed indeed. The thought drew a wicked little chuckle from the fallen businessman as he observed himself. How fitting black and red suited him better than white and blue ever would. His mustache twisted, concealing a small smile. It had been a hard road, a long one indeed, but at last his time was now. Vengeance was at hand. Humming softly to himself, he reached down and plucked a briefcase from the floor. Hefting it in his left hand, he headed for the door. Some might call him a fop or a fool, a prissy little peasant nursing a grudge, pining after a woman that was never meant to be his. They were only half right. He did have a grudge, but a peasant, him, nay, not any more. He had transcended such paltry limitations long ago. All the mockery he had endured, the humiliation and degeneration, he was well and truly beyond that now. He was beyond them. They'll see. His eyes flashed and he walked, burning with grim purpose. They'll all see. He gazed at his right arm and flexed his fingers, forcing them into a fist. His arm was still a bit stiff after training, but it obeyed him well enough. Pale black aura crawled around along the length of his limb, shrouding it in silent strength. He felt his semblance stir in response to his anger, a hound snapping at its leash, ready to rip and tear at its master's command. Really, this was enough to make a man downright giddy. It had taken some time for him to master his great new gift, but here at last, on this night of nights, he was ready, for he had been granted power, sweet, glorious power, the like of which this world had not seen in an age, and would not see again. His new associates were likewise equipped, armed and ready to do the bidding of their goddess. For what was she, if not a god? And he was a willing servant. Jack Scale was a pragmatic man. Salem had made him a fine offer. Only a fool would have refused such. His life for hers, and in return she would grant him the righteous retribution he sought. And if he had to commit a few heinous deeds here, so some discontent there, well, so be it. Such was a small price to pay for greatness. For Salem had shown him the future, the era that was to be, what should have been, what would be. He would change it all. He would take back what was his. It would all be his. Jackus reached his destination in short order, a hidden entrance carved in the side of a familiar hotel. Few knew of it these days. He hadn't either until he was told of its existence. So many secrets in this world, all just waiting to be found, and he would find them all. Atlas was built upon secrets, and he would bring it crashing down. His earpiece squawked at him in a low voice, distorted by a filter. Have you arrived? Of course I have. Jackus touched a hand to his ear. What kind of fool do you take me for? There was a pause. A fool with a grudge? Do not deviate from the plan. Our mistress will not tolerate failure. Jackus didn't dignify those words with a response. Instead, the businessman knocked upon the door thrice, paused, then knocked again. It opened for him on well-oiled hinges, with barely so much as a squeak. A servant awaited him within, the young face hooded. It did not hide their smile, or their laughter. Filthy animal. He didn't know what Salem saw in this one. They all served her in their own small way, he supposed, even madmen such as this. May I take your case, sir? A pale hand reached for the item in his possession, quivering but a little. Jackus gave it with a small smile. Do be careful. The contents are rather volatile. More laughter greeted his words. Oh, I know. How exciting. He passed it off to them, and they scurried off with a merry titter. A shudder stole over him as he watched the young lunatic clamber into the shadows. Nasty creature. I'll have to wash my hands. His objective complete. The last Gale slipped up a staircase and entered the hotel with a smile. He climbed a second set of stairs, bid his time, and after only a moment's pause, slipped among the partygoers. No one spared him so much as a passing glance. It was near the stroke of midnight now, deep into their cups as they were. Few paid a late arrival much mind, and there, among them all, he saw him, Naruto Uzumaki. Jackets felt his world bleed red. You! All of his ire, all his rage, all of his spite pushed its way to the fore, nearly breaking his iron self-control. Liar, thief, deceiver, filthy fondness. Damn him to the blackest pit of Tartarus itself. He had taken everything that was rightfully his. Were it not for him, Willow would be eaten out of the palm of his hands. His right arm twitched, and he clamped down on his wrist to restrain himself. It would be so easy to confront him here, to shout and rage and rant at him, to rip and tear. A few months ago he would have done just that. Now he knew better. He couldn't possibly beat him in a contest of strength, for he would be no match. He'd seen the footage, but there were other areas in which he excelled, areas in which his foe was not prepared to face him. The color white caught his eye, and he noticed her near the dais. His lips twitched. In time, Willow would have learned to obey him, respect him, fear him. She would have been his, and all the riches of the SDC with her. Now he would have to take her and break her, make her his by force. Such a pity. Jack is loath to use used goods, but tonight wasn't about her. This was justice. His gaze slid back to the target of his ire. He would tear down everyone and everything that fool of hers loved. Death was too good for him. His punishment must be more severe. He must suffer as he had suffered, his dignity dragged through the mud, his name besmirched, his very existence cursed. The world thought this man a hero. They were blind. He would make them see. And wouldn't you know it, Jackus knew just where to start. Best night ever. Cinder Schnee positively preened, little legs twisting from side to side as she swayed in place, all but ecstatic in her triumph. There was a high, wild light to her golden eyes. To a passerby, they almost seemed to burn with an inner fire. Her smile could only be called smug, for it was the smile of a girl who had won, and without lifting a finger. Truly, there could be no greater victory. It was a rare thing to see one so guarded lower her barriers like this, let alone in public. Almost made the little mastermind seem more human, somehow. Sienna-Con watched her in turn and tried not to smile herself. Well, empathizing with a human? Never thought I'd see the day. The thought drew her up short, let alone this one. At a glance, it might have seemed perfectly normal for one so small to squirm in thinly veiled delight as they enjoyed some dessert. Children often did that. Not so long ago, she would have thought the same. Now, she knew better. Behind that youthful facade lay a keen mind, sharp as a knife and thrice as deadly. If Cinder was smiling now, it meant she was plotting something for later. And if she was plotting something, well, it meant things were going to become very interesting very soon. Fine by her, peace was so very, very boring. You think so? The fawness tilted her head, ears twitching. Way I see it, night's just getting started. Golden eyes met hers and narrowed upon her. Oh, how so? Now it was Sienna's turn to preen. See for yourself. With a subtle flick of her wrist opened one of the many pouches she wore on her belt. It was the one concession she'd forced out of the Naruto after the servants had stuffed her into a dress. Now, Cinder leaned over and gasped as she glimpsed the gleam of jewelry within. Jewelry and a hefty bit of lien besides. Sienna closed the first and discreetly opened another. She repeated the process 3 times. When the adopted Schnee finally raised her gaze, those amber orbs gleamed with a hint of wary respect. When did you? While you were eating cake, I found the bitch's bedroom and fleeced them dry. Sienna closed the last pouch with a pleased purr. Thought you might like that. Also, I may or may not have set the bed on fire. Cinder's mouth quirked into a rare, genuine smile. Not a smirk, a smile. Did we just become best friends? Why, I believe we did. Despite her best efforts otherwise, Sienna just couldn't find it in herself to fault her fellow urchin. If anything, she was beginning to like her. In a single night, Cinder had gotten all she could ever want. The madam a disgrace, her children fleeing just to save face. Team Stark had rallied around her. Headmaster Ospin himself intervened when her wretched stepsister tried to make a scene. They'd even come to an agreement of sorts, a pact of mutual aggression towards any and all enemies. Really, she hadn't thought this night could get any better. It just didn't seem possible at the time. And quite suddenly, Came round two. She'd seen the madam first, stalking towards them, much recovered from her earlier fiasco. Cinder didn't panic, neither did she. Somehow, somewhere, some way, Naruto must have seen her too, because he and Raven swooped in like birds of prey, said a few sharp words, and carried her off. Ha! Vengeance was sweet. Now she could have her cake and eat it. No, seriously. Sienna was actually eating cake with Cinder right now, red velvet cake. Say what you would about the glass unicorn, they made a mean dessert. She even saw Willow near the dais, enjoying a slice of her own before her inevitable consort, but that wouldn't be for several minutes. For now, she settled in to watch the show as Naruto and Raven dressed Lady Tremaine down. And what a show it was! Sienna whistled at the sight, eyes agleam. Oh, she cooed aloud. That looks painful. There was certainly something to be said about the rage of a parent. Raven Bronwyn had never experienced the like herself. She'd never known her parents. She wasn't a mother, nor did she particularly care for any squalling spawn of her own. She wasn't in any hurry to have children for that matter. If it happened, it happened. Simple as that. Yet seeing this firsthand, she could understand the concept, at least in theory. The fury of the young man before her was something to be wary of. If that alarmed and elated her in equal pleasure, because right now Naruto looked absolutely livid. His blue eyes were afire in a way that would put any maiden to shame, flickering from blue to gold, then crossed to red and back again, as though unable to decide which color to choose. Even his body seemed to shimmer with unseen heat as she loomed over Lady Tremaine, ready to pounce at the slightest provocation. The stupid bitch didn't realize it, of course. She was too busy trying to push her way past him. More fool she. I had me at once. But we have so much to discuss. His tone was jovial as he intercepted the madam, a smile hiding the snarl beneath. I've heard so much about you. You have? Lady Tremaine stiffened, some of her anger bleeding off in the confusion. Wait, who are you? Her eyes widened in recognition at the last, leaving the words to trail away. Oh dear, do you not know him? Raven felt a smile play across her pale visage. He's only engaged to Willow Schnee, nobody important. Naruto's smile was just the wrong shade of vicious. I'd like to have a word with you about a mutual associate of ours. Tremaine made a choking noise and pivoted on one heel, frantically searching for some semblance of support amongst her fellow financiers. They were nowhere to be found. She found herself alone. The few that met her eyes pointedly looked the other way. They had already steered her away from prying ears. Not out of sight, of course. That wouldn't do. This needed to be seen, cornered in full view of virtually every other guest, and there was nowhere for her to hide. Good, Raven thought. This should be witnessed. Back in the tribe, if you acted like a fool, you always paid for it sooner or later, assuming your own stupidity didn't kill you first. More often than not, the chieftain would do the deed. They'd drag you out of your tent by the leg and beat you senseless in front of everyone. It taught you a lesson. It taught you to behave. Most importantly, it taught you to respect the pecking order. Tremaine was looking pretty damn low on that particular totem pole right about now. Really, dirt was above her at this point. Somehow, she doubted Naruto was about to go and throw hands with this stuffy old biddy, assuming amusing as it might be. But hey, a girl could dream, and at the end of the day, Lady Tremaine didn't have power, not real power in the physical sense. She tormented those weaker than her, grounded them down under her heel until they were nothing, less than nothing. Cinder had suffered greatly at her hand. Raven took exception to that. She'd gotten kinda attached to the kid. Young Cinder was an exception to her ironclad rule, if only because she held a fire many her age lacked. Raven had seen 100 sis with less spine in them than little Cinder's Schnee, and that was saying something. She would have done well in the tribe. She would have thrived there and become a true warrior without peers. And to hurt a child like her merely for entertainment? Not even the tribe would do such a thing. She would never do such to any daughters of hers, assuming she ever had one. For a wild moment, she actually imagined it. Mommy, that little lilac eyes gazed up at her, rimmed by blonde hair, dark circles, and a bruised face. What did I do wrong? Don't you love me? Raven shivered and pushed the memory, or was it a vision, away like a diseased leper? No, not that. Never that. She'd never do such a thing. Any daughter of hers would be cherished. They would be strong. Rage boiled inside her, and she balled it up inside her fist, refusing to speak it aloud. A roar built in her throat. She clamped down on that too, refusing to give her emotions the outlet they so craved. To release them now would send her into a downward spiral that would end with Lady Tremaine, a greasy red smear under her boot. Her gaze snapped back to Lady Tremaine, just in time to catch the tail end of their argument. Laughter bubbled out of Naruto without warning. It was a short, sharp, ugly sound that startled even Raven. Give her back to you? Quite impossible. I'm afraid we've adopted her. That smile all but split his face. You'll find the paperwork quite binding. And that would be before Willow got a hold of you. Ever been buried in litigations before? I assure you, it's not a pleasant experience. His eyes drifted to the necklace still clutched white knuckles in Madame's grip. In her anger, the landlady missed his intent. Raven didn't. Oh, so that was his intent? He couldn't be seen to make the first move. Willow had a reputation to uphold, and he didn't want to make a fool of her families here. Get a rise out of the madam, however. Make her act first. Well, you will give her back to me, you filthy faunus. A finger jabbed into his chest. At once, or I'll see you and your Schnee in court. That changed things. It never ceased to amuse her just how many people genuinely thought Naruto was a faunus. She'd certainly been one of them before Willow let her in on the secret. And I'll see you laughed right out of it. A low growl tore out of the warrior, heating Raven's blood with its ferocity. Tell me, have you ever worked a day in your life? His gaze flicked up and down the length of Tremaine, found her wanting, and scoffed. No, I think not. Now's as good a time as any to start. He clasped both hands behind his back and squared his shoulder, briefly reminding her of Nicholas. You'll certainly need to, once the authorities learn of your abhorrent business practices. Her face turned a remarkable shade of puce. How dare you? How dare I? A blonde brow quirked, and for a moment Raven wondered whether he was truly acting. I could say the same of you. Child abuse is quite the hefty crime in Atlas, but against us Schnee. Tremaine flinched, and he pounced on her weakness. Nice necklace you got there. He leaned forward in return. May I see it? Tremaine jerked back and clutched the offending item to her chest. What? No. She tried to retreat, only to find her path blocked. Get out of my way, the madam glowered. Yeah, no. Raven couldn't quite keep the smile from her face as she cut off her escape. Not gonna happen. I'll ask again. Would you kindly show me that necklace you're holding? Naruto's teeth gleamed with intent. After all, if you have nothing to hide, surely you won't mind. Their host sputtered, indignant as all her schemes continued to unravel before her very eyes. You uncouth brat! His gaze narrowed to frigid slits, not unlike those of a Schnee. Wicked hag! Raven grinned. Checkmate. To his credit, the wayward warrior made no move to dodge the subsequent slap that followed. Quite the contrary, he caught it with his face, deliberately. He turned the other cheek and smiled at her. Tremaine struck out at him again, only to find her wrist snared in an iron grip. Quite suddenly, fingers of pure metal folded around her wrist, grinding the bones beneath. The cry that followed had many a party-goer wincing, but none dared to intervene. Of course not. The madam had struck first. This was comeuppance. Now, Naruto hummed out. That wasn't very nice. His captive gasped out a colorful curse. Release me. An angry brow quirked. Like you released Cinder. She was just a street rat. A hand blurred. Whap! Tremaine's head snapped to the side with an audible crack. A bloody tooth whistled through the air and clattered to the floor. All the world fell silent, but only for a moment. Then the distant hum of conversation swept up again. The madam stumbled back, eyes wide as saucers. She clutched at her dented face, gaze flitting between the two of them, uncertain who had struck her. She hadn't seen either of them move. Why, you wretches! I'll see you hanged for this, you and that brat! A single blow caught her just above her right eye and rocked her backwards. Raven lowered her arm with a dissatisfied look. She rounded on her, blind to the blow that followed. Naruto's open-handed slap nearly ripped the not-so-poor woman from her feet. Tremaine clutched at the right side of her visage, the eye there already gone red and swollen. Say that again. Naruto's smile was harsh and cold, like the name he'd so recently taken for his own. Go ahead. He waved a hand. I dare you. For a moment, Raven wondered if the wretch would give up. She didn't. That child is mine. Mine to do with as I please. Naruto didn't give her the chance to finish. This slap is not slap acceptable. Slap. Do you understand? Tremaine recoiled with a whimper and clutching her face. Scum like you don't think. The enraged shinobi talked over her pained cry, concealing his snarl within another smile. They never do. They never consider the consequences of their actions. He tightened his grip, causing the madam to yelp and drop to a knee as he gave the nerves in her arm a vicious squeeze. She cried for mercy. Her pleas went unheard. They never stopped to think that somewhere, someone, somehow, someone might be watching them. Guess what? He leaned closer still, pressing his forehead to hers. I was watching. I will always be watching. Cinder is no longer yours to torment. His gaze lanced into her, a knife through her courage. If you're smart, you'll relinquish any claim on her, here and now. Tremaine went slack-jawed for a moment, but annoyingly enough, rallied again. Never. She's my property. Not smart then. Which makes this justice. Naruto ripped the necklace from her free hand as casually as one would snatch a fly out of the air. His hand moved again and came up with the remote bound to her belt. As I thought, shock collar with a dust crystal, newer model, quite the range on it too. Should work for miles. He eyed it for another long moment, the icy facade never shifting from his face. You were going to put this on Cinder, weren't you? Her smile damned her. What did you think would happen? Did you honestly believe we'd let you drag her back into that pit? The madam opened her mouth to condemn him, to rant, to rave. Naruto stabbed a finger at her. Be quiet! Raven gasped herself, and for a moment it felt as if all the light and life were sucked out of the world. They came rushing back a moment later, leaving her reeling. That whatever it was, had it even been directed at her, and she'd nearly passed out from the force of it. The madam, possessing no aura to speak of, and little in the way of constitution, was left a gibbering wreck. Nope, Riven realized, not an act, not at all. What did he call that before? Killing intent, to think it was possible to flatten someone with just a glance. With that thought, the seed of an idea was planted. Was it possible to learn such power? You don't get to talk. Naruto snarled at their captive. If one more word comes pouring out of your mouth, I'll kill you. He would too. He was that angry. I hate killing. It's ugly, nasty, but I can't stand people like you. His head snapped to the side as he turned and spat at her feet. You're just as bad as jackets. A match made in hell if I've ever seen one. So what it'll be? Raven crooked a brow. You hold her down and I put the necklace on her? That blank look he gave her said he hadn't thought of that until now. She'd been right about him after all. The seeds of greatness were there. They just needed a little nudge. Once he learned to discard the concepts of mercy, he'd be a frightful foe both on the battlefield and off. This wasn't a huntsman academy. Atlas would eat him alive if he let it. Moments like these reminded her of his potential. He just needed to tap into it. That silly Schnee would thank her for this someday. Fair enough. His gaze swung back to the terrified Tremaine, and Raven preened at the righteous fury she saw there. You know what they say. His eyes flashed anew. Turnabout is fair play. She didn't see Naruto move. No, wait. She told a lie. She did when she sees the trembling Tremaine by her shoulders, but not the finer points of it. He simply blurred. One moment he had the madam dead to rights as he crushed her wrist. In the next, his hand twisted, and in the next instant, the necklace was clamped firmly around her neck. The madam squeaked in surprise, hands flying to her throat, but it was already too late. A searing pulse of chakra seared the metal bands together at the base, neatly fusing them together for forevermore. Dangling from her throat, the golden dust jewel gleamed ominously. She'd never be able to remove it now. Perhaps she realized that, because her lips parted to speak. A palm blurred down, clamping over her mouth. If you raise a hand on Cinder, you won't have hands. Fire flicked in her eyes, promising pain as her own widened in terror. If you try to demean or slight her in any way, I'll see your reputation torn to shreds. And if you even think about pulling a stunt like this again, he let a trickle of killing intent slip back into his voice, not enough to knock her out, but enough to make his point all the same. I will end you. Let me give you a taste of what that feels like. Naruto's thumb slammed down on the remote with a harsh click. Tremaine spasmed as the necklace activated, lips parting in a wordless cry. Eh! That's a taste. I'll be giving this to Cinder. He waved the remote before her face, watching her pale with every pass. If she ever sees you near her or your daughters, well, I'm sure you can imagine what she'll do. He stowed the remote away in a pouch on his belt. Now, do the world a favor and get. Tremaine got. Think she bought it? Raven tipped a flute of wine to her lips as she watched the hag flee. In the tribe, a threat like that would have meant death. You should have killed her. Naruto tossed his head from side to side. I can't go around people that offend me. It's not right. The huntress to be tossed her hair and scoffed. Might makes right, Naruto. It's all about strength with you, isn't it? And why not? She placed a hand on her hip and cocked her body to one side. His eyes never left hers, even as she spoke. You proved that just now. That bitch, she growled the word like the curse it was, tormented your daughter. You took exception to that, and thus took vengeance for her. Don't you see? A finger rose and thrust forward, stabbing against his chest. You made her stop. Tremaine was weaker than you. You shouldn't have listened to. She wouldn't have listened to you otherwise. Her finger twisted, digging into his skin beneath the suit. You beat her into submission, verbally and physically. Thus might makes right. It really doesn't. It does. Chiappa snapped the words as she pushed closer to him. The distant bong, bong, bong of a grandfather clock signaled the stroke of midnight. Raven smiled. You're going to be amazing someday. I hope I'll see it. Blazing blue eyes narrowed upon her. Raven offered a placid blink in return, emotions hidden behind a carefully crafted facade. There it was, that feeling, like watching a fellow bandit sizing her back up in the tribe, one alpha to another. Naruto thought he could take her, probably could. The last duel had ended in his favor, but she hadn't been idle since they last met either. She'd been practicing with her semblance, honing her skills. She had a few tricks up her sleeve. He turned away. We'll see. Raven sighed. Still naive. He would learn eventually, but now wasn't the time to push. Moment danced in the corner of her eye. Two small blurs rapidly approaching from the east. Didn't take much to guess who. A swift pivot placed her at his side and got her out of harm's way. Sure enough, Cinder slammed into Naruto's side, nearly knocking him down with the sheer force of her tackle. Golden eyes blazed up into blue, wide and happy, brimming with adoration. That was amazing. You made a fool of her. Naruto winced. Say, saw that, did you? I might have gotten a little carried away. No, you didn't. Sienna latched onto his other leg. You did plenty. Despite the blonde's protest, Cinder buried her head into his leg and started babbling. Raven indulged herself for a moment and listened intently. The words I and love you might have been mentioned here and there. Best that ever was certainly a common phrase. A better person would have extricated him from Cinder and Sienna, saved him from these children who adored him so. Raven had never claimed to be a good person. She simply was. Rather than rescue him, she left her fellow warrior squirming. I'll leave you to it then. She winked. Good luck. Raven sashayed away, hips swaying. Willow coughed politely into her fist. That single solitary sound echoed long and loudly into her microphone, drawing a wince from all those assembled. Still, they accepted the cue for what it was. Someone dimmed the lights. A spotlight flashed on well above the dais, bathing her in faint ethereal glow. All eyes fell upon her, blood pounding in her ears, hammering alongside her heart. This was it, her moment. A lesser woman would have given into it, let it overpower her, hold her in its way. She was a Schnee. She did not falter. Willow took a deep breath to steady herself, marshalling her thoughts like a small army. Only then did she speak. A dear friend of mine recently reminded me of something important. Her gaze swept across those below the dais, taking each in turn. She saw Cinder standing across the way, preening under Naruto's watchful gaze, his hand on her shoulder. Sienna preened as the other mused her hair. We're all afraid of something. She chuckled ruefully when she found Summer and Crow, each with an arm wrapped around a sullen Raven. A laughing Taiyang held a flute of champagne to her lips, forcing her to drink the so-called swill she so loathed. Each and every one of us feels fear. We all make mistakes. But that's what makes us human. She shook her head, dispelling the sudden chill she felt. The single quality that is common across every living creature on this planet is fear. Her words sent a ripple racing through the crowd, one born of uncertainty. Isn't it funny then that as common as fear is, we so easily underestimate its power? The silence became deafening. Fear of growing close to someone. Her gaze slid to Naruto. He met hers without fear, her gaze gliding away and caught to that of Osman himself. The subsequent fear of loss. Sure enough, the headmaster raised the glass in agreement. Fear of failure. Arnwood himself winced beneath her stoic glare. And as more people depend on you, these fears can take on greater power. She banished that fear with a languished smile, but the fear itself isn't worthy of concern. It is who we become while in its clutches. She felt her spirits lift. A trembling pale hand rose, beseeching those who listened to her words. Will you be proud of that person? Her arms spread wide as her sides towards the fractured moon high above. Will you forgive them? Will you understand why they felt the need to do the things they did? Arthur tittered merely as he crawled away at another line of code, his mustache twisted in total triumph. This will be legendary. Will you even recognize them? Cinder smiled as Willow's gaze settled upon her. One day, she would live up to this legacy. She was a Schnee after all. Or will the person standing back at you be the very thing you should have feared from the start? Jackie Scale adjusted his tie and looked on with a smirk. He touched a hand to his right ear. It's time. I suppose we all find out sooner or later. Willow took a breath to steady herself for a moment. Just a moment. She understood what it was to have power over people. It was heady thing. All the world was silent, hanging on her every word. She had but to speak and they would listen. Wealth and influence had nothing on this sensation. It would be the simplest thing to stoke their passions and have them fawn over her like the heiress she was, where she was a petty person, and she might even accept their rapid praise. But she was more than that now, so much more. This song is dedicated to the love of my life. Blue eyes met steer assure across the room. He changed me. He saved me. This song is for him. He flashed her a thumbs up and her pale face turned rosy. I'm afraid I haven't had much time to practice. A new song, one she practiced just for this occasion. So this will have to be brief. Polite applause greeted her. All right then. She closed her eyes and breathed one last time. Behind her, the band swept into a haunting melody, just as they'd been told. Willow's heart hammered in her chest, but she kept herself calm and moved to the first line. Naruto looked up. That song sounds kind of familiar. It did. He'd never heard it before, but somehow, some way, it spoke to him. Willow touched a hand to her heart as she continued her haunting ballad. Her eyes never left his, not a once. It wasn't a particularly fast song, really, it was downright slow, but words blurred together, but he understood them all the same. It was a song of fear, of fighting against it, of surpassing it, and fear of loss and love. The words rang within his heart like a clarion call, blinding him to all else. Something twitched in his heart, and without warning, the veil fell away. A realization struck him. Naruto gulped. Oh dear. Fool of a boy! Nicholas brought the hilt of his blade down, striking Marcus across the face in a vicious riposte. His would-be assassin crashed backwards, bleeding from the nose. A hand went up, cradling another semblance, the fifth of such he'd seen tonight. The elder Schnee gave chase and swung his great sword in a vicious arc. Blood splattered his face. 3 fingers flew away, the price for the assassin's pride. A pained shriek split the night, so sharp and poignant that he hesitated. Marcus stumbled back, clutching at his bloodied fingers. Fevered eyes met his. I hate you! You hate being powerless. The Schnee scoffed as his forsaken son kicked forward with a metal-shod boot, trying to close the distance once more. Because you are. There's always someone stronger, son. He stepped to the right as a curtain of wind ripped at him. If you define yourself by your power to take life, the desire to dominate, to possess, then you have nothing. Shut up! Blue eyes narrowed to arctic slits. I will not, dear boy. Marcus evaded the claws of an angry Beowulf, tumbling under a great Ursa, only to find himself caught in the fist of an icy Berengal. The great ape showed no mercy. Firm fingers closed around his torso and squeezed with frightful force. His ribs creaked ominously. A rasped croak tore out of him. Still, he clawed at the giant fist holding him. Nicholas grimaced, heart faltering at the sight. In another life, he would have raised this boy, but he was too broken now, too twisted by his mother. With but a thought, he commanded his familiar to finish what he had started. I am sorry that it has come to this, but there's no redeeming you. This is for the good of the... A flung axe slammed into the Bengal's frozen forehead. His familiar twitched once, maw open in surprise, then shattered it into brittle ice. Marcus tumbled free, hit the floor, and sprawled away into the shadows. How very irritating. He would heal, no doubt, and they'd be right back where they started. Blasted semblances. Nicholas still let him go. His attention was already elsewhere. An icy blue eye appeared over his shoulder. Whomever they were, he knew them not. She, for this could only be a woman, wore dark robes and a wicked full face mask in the shape of what might have been a grim. Her hair lay hidden in a hood, denying him even that tidbit of information. She was tall, slender. He could discern that much, and little else. More of you, then. He tutted softly and turned to face this new threat. Honestly, you're little ants. It's a little sad, really. I didn't want to spill any more blood tonight. A low rasp emerged from within that mask. Misguided arrogance. You will die tonight, Nicholas Schnee. The Schnee in question tittered softly. Was that supposed to be a threat? How uninspiring. Child. He spun his sword down with a frigid smile. My sword was once slick with the blood of my enemies. I have killed mountains of men and faunus alike. Hide your face if you wish. It means nothing to me. With but a flourish, he brandished his great sword over his left arm, ready to attack or defend at the slightest provocation. What's one more on the pile? With a single stomp, he summoned yet more glyphs around him, replenishing his fallen army in an instant, and his aura dipped that much lower. That was wonderful. Willow had scarcely finished her lullaby. Indeed, she barely made it 2 steps down the dais before Naruto slammed into her. She was careful, of course. It wouldn't do to bowl her over after all. Still, her spine stiffened as his arms wrapped around her, and a tiny little gasp fled from her lips. Naruto didn't give her any more of a moment than that. He swept her up into his arms, lifted her from her feet, and did a little twirl to spin her into the air. The crowd ate it up and applauded the display. I didn't know you could sing like that. He set her down and clasped both of her hands in his, blue eyes well and truly alight. You're incredible. Really, now. And before his eyes, she flushed down to the very roots of her hair. Did you like it? I had to improvise a bit. I loved it. It was an honest answer, one Naruto frankly gave little thought to. Perhaps he should have, but he didn't. Willow made a keening noise through her teeth. Why? Was it something he'd said? Why must you do this to me? He didn't have a chance to answer her. The music swung up. On a whim, he offered her his hand. Willow's eyes got very big. She stepped back. What are you doing? What's it look like? He grinned. This might sound cliche, but may I have this dance? This was happening. This was actually happening. This was actually well and truly happening. Willow couldn't move, couldn't speak, could barely bring herself to speak at all. Naruto pulled her close, laid a hand on her waist and another on her shoulder as a gentleman should. Her ear tore itself between fight and flight in equal measure. She wanted to bolt. No, she wanted the opposite. She wanted to hold him, to embrace him, ravish him, and all right, she was going too far in the other direction. When he let her take the lead, she was almost grateful for it. The music was soft and slow, just the sort of tempo she'd grown accustomed to, more waltz than a tempo. She soon realized why. A small smile touched her lips. Naruto saw it and scowled. What's so funny? You, dear. Was it just her imagination, or did he shiver just now? Step. For all your speed and strength, I thought you would be a better dancer than this. Another step, swaying to one side. It's surprising, and a little heartwarming, if I'm honest. In a fight, sure, He let her lead him into the next step, but not in the fancy get-up. Nobody's perfect. No one is. The words warmed her so. She laid her chin on his shoulder. We're good together, aren't we? This time there could be no mistaking the way he stiffened against her, not the faint rosy hue to his cheeks, nor the way his lips curled in a small smile. We really are. Without warning, he took the lead, twirling her under his arm. Willow's cold heart skipped a single traitorous beat. A voice of vice whispered in her ear. Mine. Step, another step, twirl. You are a quick study, she complimented him, not trusting herself to say anything else. He smirked at that, not a smile, a smirk. It made Willow think things, terrible, naughty things that had no business being spoken of in front of good people. She imagined those hands roving lower in a way she never would. She stepped into him and he matched her, leaning close. His lips brushed her ear. Yes, I have a good teacher. Her mind reeled. Bad brain, betrayal, don't go there. His words heated her blood, muddying her thoughts. She wanted to be first and foremost in his mind, the apple in his eye. She wasn't sure she could bear the thought of him with anyone else, and yet somewhere he went, yet everywhere he went, he attracted attention, too much attention. It drove her mad. Kali, gods no, her mind rejected such a notion out of hand. The woman was a temptress, raven. Unacceptable. She brought out a savage side of Naruto that frightened her. Summer. Unlikely. She probably just wanted his arm. Maybe. Besides, she tried to convince herself of it all and wasn't quite successful. She would be his first. If nothing else, she would have that. Those fierce blue orbs flitted down to her lips, then back again. He wanted her, desired her in the way he did no one else. It made her feel strong, powerful, in a different way. Stifling a tiny pang of anxiety, Willow shifted a bit closer, pressing herself flush against him. She loved him. She wanted to have children with him. Lovely little white-haired girls with sparkling blue eyes and faint whiskered cheeks. Her mind conjured up 3 names in an instant of its own volition, as if they were simply meant to be. Winter, Weiss, Whitley. They felt good. They felt right. Speaking of right, if you move, she whispered the words on a thread of breath, I'm going to be terribly cross with you. Naruto drew in a short, sharp breath through his teeth. Willow. Her lips met his in a tentative kiss, and then, when he didn't pull away, probed deeper. Her arms flung herself around his neck as she tilted her head for better access. If he pushed her away, she was going to break. She just knew it, but he didn't. He simply held her. No, not enough. Her blood burned, and she drew him closer, deepening the kiss to nip at his lip. She felt awakened for the first time in forever, a fire in a way she'd never known. Her body ached for him. She didn't know how he felt about any other person, anyone else, and in this moment, she didn't care. Let any fool challenger come. She would meet them with ice and steel, with fire and blood. Mine. He knows too much, James. Far, far too much. Oz, you're being paranoid. Am I? The headmasters didn't take his glare off the dancing pair, unlikely as they were. One incident I could overlook as coincidence, but 2, 3, no, I think not. Exasperated, he gave up and downed his flute of wine in a huff. I thought it odd that he was so adamant against joining Beacon at the time. Now I see why. He's forming a power base in Atlas. His brow forward a bit as he contemplated the matter further. The Schnee family is all but bestowed with his every deed. The White Fang sing his praise. He saved the Winter Maiden, and now he's flirting with my students. Tell me, what am I to think of that? He could be an agent of Salem for all we know. A dark brow rose. I think that unlikely given his behavior. Damn it, man. Osmond buried his head in his hands. Not you too. And another brow rose. Calm, old friend. Your anxiety's showing again. He isn't going anywhere. Yes, perhaps I'm overreacting. With a supreme effort of will and a deep breath, the mortal calmed himself. Regardless, I need to speak with him. I simply must, if only to know where his loyalties lie. Steely eyes swung back to the intertwined pair. Good luck prying him away from her for the next hour. To his credit, Osmond blanched. Yes, well, I can certainly wait until they're finished. all good things come to an end. Eventually the music swung down, and the duo found themselves forced to part. Unhappy with such an ending, Willow darted in and stole another kiss for herself. Naruto yielded with a surprising grunt. His mouth was warm on hers, and she savored it. Fleeting through it was until it wasn't. And pale fingers threaded in his hair, pulling him closer. His arms tightened around her waist, crushing her to him. Someone whooped in the background and cheered them on. Summer. Willow ignored them, holding on as long as she could. Finally, her lungs could endure no more. Neither could he. They pulled away at last, lips bruised, gasping for air. Her forehead kissed his, and she luxuriized in their shared closeness. They swayed together, despite the silence, paying no heed to those around them. Naruto found his voice first. So, what now? I don't know, she admitted. Willow had no idea what came next, not what to say, nor what to do. Spirits. She'd never been in a relationship before, never felt the touch of lust, never thought her heart would thaw enough to care for anyone outside of her family, but thought it had, and there could be no going back from this. She could no longer return to her once frigid ways, then she could turn back time. She wanted to stay here in his arms forever, or better yet, find some shadowy corner with him. Consequences be damned, and might I have a moment of your time, Miss Schnee? Naruto made a face. Willow mirrored it. She knew that voice. Sure enough, she turned to find Headmaster Ospen only a few paces away. Hey now, Naruto stepped up beside her. Anything you have to say to her, you can say to me. Is that so? Surprisingly, Ospen pounced on the bait. Very well. I'll be frank. I wish to speak with you alone. He cast an apologetic look at Willow. May I borrow him for a minute? Some of her stress must have shown through, because that silly visage softened somewhat. I promise to return him unharmed. Naruto grinned. You can borrow my fist. Be nice, Willow whispered to him before he could snap at the poor man. I know you want nothing to do with Beacon, but we mustn't make unnecessary enemies. He grimaced. Fine. Naruto. She swatted his arm lightly. Behave yourself, huh? Her words became a startled gasp as he darted in to kiss her. All the strength fled out of her for a moment before she mastered herself. Then a cry fled from her lips. That wasn't fair. You have my thanks. The headmaster smiled, suddenly looking years younger for it. I've heard incredible things about you, and I wanted to ask. A maid leaned low to whisper into Willow's ear as they withdrew further from earshot. Jackie Scale is here to see you, Miss Schnee. Her words were soft, almost fearful. He's on the lower level. Is he now? Willow absolutely bristled. She hadn't expected him to come crawling back. What the hell was he playing at? Send him away. I'm not interested in whatever he has to say. We've tried, my lady. The maid informed her with a grimace. He won't leave. Blast it. He was going to make a scene, wasn't he? Of course he was. Jackie struck her as the spiteful sword. She dismissed the maid with a glower and turned in search of him. Naruto was occupied with Ospen, but he spared a glance for her. She waved him down and calmed him with a look. Where were the others? Zender and Sienna had cornered Raven and Summer and seemed to be talking most animatedly while the boys looked on and made their bets. She was alone. Fine. She could handle this. She was a big girl. Jackie awaited her in the lower foyer, flanked by an absolutely giant of a man. Gone was his gray attire of before, replaced now by an ebony suit with a striking crimson tie. He looked different. Calm in a way he hadn't been before. Willow touched a hand to Sable, still bound in her belt, just to make sure it was there. The cylinders emitted a faint click as her thumb traced over them. She took comfort in the presence of her weapon, such as it was. Something told her there would be no necessities here. Best to be ready just in case. What do you want, Jackus? He looked remarkably unruffled for a man who was supposedly the laughingstock of Atlas. His smile spoke of sudden confidence. Hello, Willow. You look lovely this evening. When he reached for her hand, she allowed it. Not so when he tried to kiss it. She ripped it from his grasp the moment his lips neared hers. A scowl slipped through his stoic countenance, and she took some petty pride in the knowledge that she irritated him so. He certainly irked her well enough upon her first meeting. Very well. His grimace deepened. To business, then. I wish to discuss a proposal with you. No, thank you. Where was he getting all this confidence from? It wasn't like him. He should have been humbled, should have known better than to try again. Whatever you want, I'll have nothing to do with it. As you wish. She wasn't prepared for his smile. I thought as much. Still, I had to try it before this. Wait, he was giving up. Just like that. Why? An explosion rattled Willow's world. She rounded on the sound with a start, eyes bulging only for a second blast to rock the hotel and nearly send her sprawling, followed by a third, a fourth, then a fifth. Flames burst down from the ceiling with a wordless roar, sending debris flying from the rafters as yet a sixth blast detonated. Bystanders panicked, turning what had been a slightly inebriated party into a wild stampede. Everyone ran for their lives. She soon lost sight of Naruto and the others in the chaos, but not Jackus. He stood apart, and his guard with him, utterly unruffled, and she realized who was to blame. What have you done? Just cleaning out the chaff, dear wife. Jackus made a show of adjusting his tie and crossed both arms behind his back, uncaring of the panic he'd created. It was so kind of you to lure so many people here, and so many faunists too. He wagged a brow at her and tutted softly. At a Schnee gathering, no less. I suspect the news will be all over Atlas by the dawn. The roof creaked ominously overhead as fresh embers spread upon the walls and floor, settling it aflight. Poor animals, truly. They were fools to trust you. Don't call them that. Her gaze snapped back to the businessman. And I'm not your wife. My dear, he scoffed at her words. You have no say in the matter. Hazel, take her. The giant rumbled. As you wish. Willow reacted in an instant and kicked backwards, evading an attack that would have flattened her outright. Even as the giant pivoted towards her, she drew sable, sketched a glyph beneath her feet. She could do this. She could take him. Jackus was a non-combatant. No threat. He couldn't hurt her if he tried. His guard was the true threat here, and only so long as she let him within arm's reach. With white light flared under her heels, flinging her to safety. Sable tore free to slash through the air, tracing a silver line of ice that caused the giant to slip and overextend on his second strike. There, an opening, she lunged forward. Behind her, Cinder cried out in pain. Mom! Help! Willow's concentration slipped for a moment. Her gaze tore back towards the fire and flames. Cinder! Jackie smiled at her exposed flank and uttered a single word. Pain. Her entire body locked up in a singular instant, betraying her completely. There was no other word for the sheer agony that followed. Every fiber of her being, every muscle, every cell clamped down as one. Her legs buckled, and all her power, all her strength deserted her. Semblance, it had to be. She fought against it, tried to push past it, to no avail. A shadow fell over her. She looked up. Hazel looked back, fist already hurtling at her face. In the final moments before impact, he spoke. I'm sorry for this. Sleep now. Willow's world went black. Previous. There are some things a man cannot forgive. This was one of them. Where is she? The glass unicorn was burning. Everyone was screaming. The world of right, of chaos and bodies and color. Cinder struggled in the wreckage. Burning pain laced through her side. She looked down and saw blood against her side. Scarlet spread across her dress. Well, that can't be good. Sienna whimpered beside her. It hurts. Osmond. The headmaster jumped just a little as he spoke his name. You said you wanted to know what I can do. Naruto crossed his fingers. Let me show you. 1,000 clones swarmed into Atlas. Nicholas turned his head aside and spat blood. Last mistake. If you want her, you know what you must do. Forsake the Schnee name. You helped me, and so I shall help you. Rest assured. Arthur laid a hand on his shoulder. We will find her. He guided him away from the desk. In fact, I have a little something that will aid you in that very endeavor. Naruto growled. I really don't have time for a curtain swept back. Blue eyes widened. Oh, he managed numbly. Resistance is futile. Jackus preened. My semblance is invincible. Now kneel. Willow grit her teeth. I will not. Freya, what are you doing? The Winter Maiden smiled softly. Sadly, something that should have been done a long time ago. You're a warrior, Naruto. Stop fucking around and act like one. They took her. What are you gonna do about it? He raised a hand in response. High above him, the skies opened up. End of chapter 12.